Welcome to this edition of At the Mic. I'm your host, Keith Malinak. This week, I sit down with a real estate agent who in a previous life was the lead guitarist in a rock and roll band. That conversation with George Huntley of the Connells is next. But first, I want to talk to you about coffee. American Pride Roasters coffee, to be exact, in the Dolly Madison blend, available right now. There's so much to love about Dolly Madison, who, of course, was married to America's fourth president, and she was the first official First Lady of the United States. Okay, so you ready for some Dolly Madison fun facts? Here we go. Her first name was actually Dorothea, but she had been called Dolly from a very young age, and it stuck. And get this, Dolly Madison, the first American to respond to a telegraph message. She began the tradition of the Easter egg roll on the White House lawn, and just so much to this wonderful lady, this wonderful figure in American history, Dolly Madison. So, in honor of Dolly and James and their love of French cuisine, the Dolly Madison is a French roasted blend of South American beans with raspberry flavoring mixed in to add a dash of dessert flavor. You really should try this blend if you want a dessert coffee from the people who do coffee best. aprcoffee.com. And don't forget to use promo code ATM at checkout for 10% off your entire purchase. That's aprcoffee.com.
You're listening to At the Mic with Keith, an independent podcast production.
George Huntley is my guest this week on At the Mic. What a thrill it was for me to travel to Raleigh, North Carolina, sit down right there in his home and break out a couple of microphones and have a good conversation with just a great guy. I look forward to all of us getting to know him as we sit down on At the Mic. Sitting in the living room of one George Huntley here in Raleigh, North Carolina, I am so excited. I'm going to try not to be a Connells fanboy geek here during this interview, which I guess really I owe a great thanks to one individual for making this happen, because I had invited you through this random email a long time ago that, quite honestly, I would have dismissed it too. This crazy guy saying, hey, you want to talk about the Connells? Anyway, so George Huntley, thanks for being a part here today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Ronna Broadwell in Roxborough, North Carolina. And she actually called me after your Pat Gray episode where you all were talking about
the greatest guitarist of all time, which of course George Huntley is among them.
No. But she gave me a heads up about what a great guy you were. And so that was the beginning of this. And thanks, Ronna.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for reaching out, contacting George, which made him go back and check his email and go, oh, I never replied to that. So anyway, that's great. We've got a lot to cover, man. Let's go to the very beginning of your life. Let's go to your childhood. You were born and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we are today.
Yep.
I know you through the Connells music band that I am such a huge fan of and have been over the years. And we're going to obviously talk about that time of your life. But let's go back to the beginning. You're the youngest of 5 siblings?
That's right.
Okay. So now, did they all stay here locally as well? Or are they kind of...
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, that's got to be great for like getting together with family and stuff like that.
It is. Yeah, we're very close.
Yeah. All right, man. So you grew up here. You've stayed here. You've seen, obviously, indescribable change probably here in your community. Take us back to your earliest memory growing up. It has something to do with being in the back of a station wagon?
Yeah. Yeah, we used to have this, one of those station wagons where the door opened wide from the side. And,
right, yeah.
And being the baby, I had the back seat, and my next brother, Wilson, would probably be back there with me, tormenting me in some way. And I just remember Dad opening the door and me standing there and looking at him. His arms were probably full with stuff, you know. And I just remember standing there looking at him and him walking in. I think the reason I remember it, the reason I call it an early memory, is because there was probably something in that moment where I had to figure out how to get out of that station wagon. And obviously I did.
Right. Well, I wonder if there was some sort of level of trauma, even just for being that young, because it just seems like more often than not, when people share their earliest memories here on At the Mic, there is that element of trauma which has somehow burned it into their memory. And I'm not saying that you were left there in a traumatic state, but just as a young little guy in the back of the thing trying to figure out how to get down, maybe that's why it imprinted on you.
Well, in the pecking order, being the baby with all those kids and only two parents, there is that element of always kind of being behind everybody, always being the last one. And, and I think you have to get some distance from that part of your life to realize how much it affected who you become as an adult.
Do you think that being so young, and maybe that's just one experience, but maybe there was a lot of times where you just kind of had to figure it out on your own, and did it make you maybe more independent being such a and younger?
Yeah, and I think one thing I can truthfully say that I remember just being alone a lot. That there was, when everybody went off to school, I just remember there was a lot of free time, and I remember that my playtime was spent a lot of times just writing little melodies in my head, and I always remember that feeling of, did I make that up, or where did I hear that? And I still remember this little song that I wrote when I was just learning how to talk.
That is awesome. So you've had music in your veins from the very beginning. Was your family, your parents, musical?
Well, my middle brother, Neil, was very musical, and my dad wanted to be a musician. He was a writer, but he wanted to be a musician. He was kind of a PR man with a he had a little newspaper column called Small Talk that he wrote for local small town newspapers, and he was a storyteller, and we found out, we learned about him later on in life that he always wanted to be a musician. And so when those Lowry organs came out in the 70s, with the preset drum, with all those.
Yeah, I had one of those.
Yeah, baby.
I wanted to be a musician.
Yeah. And he'd get up early in the morning while everybody's still asleep, put his headphones on.
That's really cool.
And I have another memory of him, of watching him sitting there with his back turned with his headphones on, teaching himself how to play the organ. And he's like sitting there playing like, please release me, let me go, and he's playing it and looking at it. He's got one hand doing the chord and one hand doing the melody, and he's just sitting there. And there's this thought that comes over me at the time. Oh, I could scare him so bad right now. I could walk up behind him and just goose him good. But I didn't have that. There was something pure about the moment, and I checked myself, and I didn't do it. But I just remember thinking, he really wanted that and made it happen. Brought that instrument into a house full of kids, and we loved it.
That's great, man. We did lunch here before we sat down to record, and I told you I was going to ask you this. So I hope you'll tell this story again of Chi-Chi the monkey, because you had a pet monkey growing up.
Yeah.
That is so fun. Well, first of all, where do you go to buy a monkey?
Doctor Pet Center, baby. Well, let me tell you, the Doctor Pet Center, that's DOKTOR, was in Cameron Village, the shopping center formerly known as Cameron Village.
Okay.
And they just 1 year right before Christmas, their little window shop, there were all these squirrel monkeys running around in there. And this is back in the day before we knew how they captured these monkeys. We didn't know the trauma of the trappers,
Gotcha.
So there's these little monkeys in there. And my big brother Wilson, who was closest to me in age growing up, he went to mom and dad and said, I really want a monkey for Christmas. I will never ask you for anything ever again.
Right. Oh, we've all tried that one, right?
Yeah. And my dad told my mom, well, I always wanted a monkey.
Oh, wow.
And so Wilson got the monkey.
Found a soft spot.
But it took 3 tries. The first one was a silverback squirrel monkey. Imagine that.
Wait, how? Okay.
He could hold the cage and just rattle it, and the whole cage. They brought him. They send him out the door in these little canary cages, and he could make that thing rattle, and he'd look at you, and his face would contort, and his teeth would. And so we took him back. We took the silverback back. The second monkey we got had a compound fracture in her little hind leg. It was awful. It's like, how did nobody realize this monkey was mortally wounded? And then the third monkey we got was Chi-Chi. Uh-huh. And Chi-Chi immediately just became, a member of the family.
Yeah.
And we all had a relationship with her. We had her for 6 years until Wilson went off to college. And that's when Daddy said, son, you cannot leave that monkey here.
So where did she end up going?
That's the best part of the story.
Uh-huh.
I guess it was called the Durham Zoo back then. And so they had a bunch of squirrel monkeys. And so we took Chi-Chi over there. And when we went back to see her a year later, she had a baby on her back. And we knew it was Chi-Chi because she had this, right over one of her eyes, she had a little birthmark kind of a thing.
Okay.
And so she was very recognizable in a big crowd of squirrel monkeys. And we saw her, and she kept kind of like looking at us like, are you all here? But there was this monkey, like a little baby, crawling around on her.
That is so sweet.
Just doing what she used to do to us.
And she recognized you think?
I don't know. Okay. We stood there, and we didn't get closer than maybe 20 feet. Okay. And me and Wilson and Mom, probably, maybe Neil, were there. And we stood there saying, do you think she recognizes us? And we were like, oh, yeah, she's smart. Uh-huh. She was a very smart animal.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love the story, though, of you were telling me where she got on top of the TV.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us that story.
Well, Wilson and I used to sleep on this big sun porch, which had no heat and no air. It was an old sun porch, and it was just it was a sleeping porch, it had a bunch of windows. And so we had a little black and white Zenith tube TV that was up there. And Chi-Chi had this, a neighbor of ours built this really big tall cage with, chicken wire and several little climbing things in it. But when Wilson and I were up there watching TV, we'd let her out. And one of her favorite spots to sit was on top of that Zenith, which was nice and warm.
Right.
She's tropical, and so I remember we were sitting there on the couch in our blankets, watching something, and Chi-Chi's sitting there, and she's kind of going to sleep. You could see her go to sleep on top of the TV. She'd get nice and warm, and she just, and all of a sudden the TV goes, pow! And Chi-Chi jumped, a country mile, ran around the room going, yay!
Yeah, like,
yay,
what just
yay!
happened?
And what had happened was she had peed on that hot tube, and it blew the TV. It seemed like it blew the TV up, but all it did was just shut the TV down because it was pee-pee hitting the hot tube. And man, it took about 10 minutes for that thing to warm back up, and it all returned back to normal, but we were...
Boy, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And Chi-Chi ended up getting out at one point, right? And
she
went
did.
on a little tour of the town?
Yeah, I think, there were probably several times Chi-Chi got out, but if Wilson wasn't home, because Wilson was her main man, if Wilson wasn't home, I'm sure Chi-Chi was going out in the city of Oaks looking for him. And so she just started going, and she couldn't stop. And she made it over to, North Carolina State campus where...
Oh, NC State?
Yeah,
okay.
NC State. Go Pack.
Okay.
And there was a dorm over there, I think, where some boys were in their room, window open, watching a football game, eating popcorn, and all of a sudden this monkey comes in their window, and is eating popcorn, watching football with them. So back in those days, there was this AM radio station, WPTF. You could call in as a talk radio, and these fellas called in and said, "You're not going to believe this, but there's a monkey in our dorm room. And if anybody out there's missing a monkey, here's how to get us. Here's where we are." So one of our neighbors knew that Chi-Chi had gotten out that day, and he was a teenage boy in our neighborhood, and he came down and got Mom, and together they went and got Chi-Chi. We got Chi-Chi back before Wilson got home. He never even had to endure any of the trauma.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So tell us about someone very meaningful in your life, Robert Mcmillan.
Oh, Robert. Well, Robert is a hero of mine. He'll be 99 next week. We're a week from today. He'll be 99 years old.
That's great.
And he came into my life as the father of my first best friend, Lewis. Lewis, a year younger than me, but a year taller than me. But Robert was my scoutmaster, Troop 306. And then he, through the years, he became, my Sunday school teacher as an adult. He taught that Sunday school class till the pandemic, when they stopped doing that up at Pullen Baptist Church, which was the church that he had spent his whole life going to.
So he was effectively your teacher from being a kid up until the last couple of years. That is amazing.
Till now, yeah. And we, I don't see him as much. The pandemic sort of broke our rhythm, but we keep up. The other day, my brother Roy and I went over to the Mcmillan house and played guitar with that group of people that was brought to us from the Robert Mcmillan class of people. There was an attorney in the area named Wade Smith, who was a great guitar player as well as a great attorney. And we just kind of sat around with Duncan Mcmillan. May was there. Lewis came by. And we sat around and just played some music. And I was actually crashing the party because this group of people, they're a little bit older than me, but it's a little band called Road Hard, and they just get together and do, some music.
So, yeah, and you refer to Robert as the Atticus Finch of your childhood. That's awesome. That's a great descriptor right there.
Well, I'll tell you, I went on a fantastic, I think I want to say it was a 400-mile canoe trip. The summer I was 15, and we went on this canoe trip. We started in the Lumbee River, and we went all the way down to Georgetown, South Carolina. So it was a windy, circuitous path that took us 10 days. And there were all kinds of adventures on that trip, but there were some people along the way that kind of harassed us a little bit. It was Robert, another adult, and 3 teenage boys. And there was a group of guys that were harassing us at this one stop. And I just had this confidence that Robert knew what he was doing. When the people came back and started driving their car around our tent that night, spinning out around our tents, they were just hooping it up and hollering, and I could hear Robert's voice. He was saying, "Stay in your tent." And eventually they drove off. They were messing with us earlier, and they came back. But I think I just always felt like he had this aura about him of security in who he was, and his little sayings like. You just tell Robert something just as far-fetched as anything, and he'd say, "There's nothing new under the sun," And there was this feeling of like that's new and fresh, but yet it's very similar to something that's happened before,
right.
And I don't know, his interpretation of the Bible was real instructive for. Me and my brothers, my brother Neil and brother Roy, we all attended his class as adults, and my mom went there too. So, yeah, Robert My hat goes off to Robert every chance I get.
That's so great. It feels like today in 2022 that men like Robert, the way you described him, it just seems that those kind of individuals are really lacking in society now. And so that's really great to hear that you had that.
And his age group, he's a Marine in World War II, and he was followed in the footsteps of his father as a lawyer. And to go through that time, that era, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and in a southern town, there had to be many, many challenges as a white attorney where you're actually, facing the right thing to do versus what might be the convenient thing to do. And that's why I call them the Atticus Finch, because
I see. So he actually just had civil rights type cases?
There were high profile defense cases that'd be all over the paper. And then the case would end and we'd go on a camping trip because Robert needed to get away.
Right.
So that's when we would go up to the Appalachian Trail and take a hike, and he would just leave us. He would just leave us, and then in the distance we'd hear the woo, and we'd know that just come on, keep coming. He's just up the way,
That's so great.
But he was an awesome teacher. He taught by example better than anybody I think I've ever known.
That is so cool. So you were the class of 1984 at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
That's right.
You majored in biostatistics, which just reading that word makes my math challenged head spin. So what was the college experience like for you, man?
Well, that's a period of my life where I think I felt, I felt like, I had this, everybody was telling me I had this math skill. And so back in the 70s when you were taking like the California Achievement Test in high school, you remember that? Mm-hmm. And you'd get the dialogue back and it'd say, "Oh, you'll make a great garbage man, you'll be a great house painter." And really those things were probably more in my skill set. Huh. But I did have this little knack for math. I could do math. I could learn it, and so back in those days before the World Wide Web and everything, there was everybody in this town was saying, "Well, you should be an engineer," and so I went to engineering school for a couple of years at UNC Charlotte. Hated it. Oh my gosh, I hated it. And I always wanted to go to Carolina because my oldest sister and oldest brother, Nancy and Roy, went there. And so I always wanted to go to Carolina. So I got in my car one day and I went and met another childhood mentor, a man named Jacob Kuhlman, who was a high school Sunday school teacher. And Jake Kuhlman and I had a great relationship. And I went in there and he was, in the School of Public Health at Chapel Hill. And I just went by to see him. I said, I'm kind of looking for myself. And he gave me this book. It had nothing to do with nothing, or so I thought. It was a book called Elk Speaks. You ever heard of Elk Speaks? Mm-mm. Well, it's about an Indian medicine man who has this really interesting story to tell. And the stories are about a series of dreams that he has. And I went home and I read this book and I thought, gee, I wonder why he gave me this. Because on the one hand, the book seems really depressing because this guy is having all these dreams about the demise of the Indian nation. But at the same time, he's constantly looking for solutions to problems. He never gives up. He's constantly looking for solutions. And so I went back to see Jake and told him, I said, I really love that book, And he said, I've been thinking about you too. And he said, I'm really glad you came back. There's somebody I want you to meet. So I went down and we went and talked to Craig Turnbull, who was, at the School of Public Health and the Department of Biostatistics. And that was it. And I I joined in, I lost a few credit hours because there was some stuff that wouldn't transfer. But, I had a great time ending up at Carolina, which is where, Mike and David Connell were, and their brother, Mike's twin, John, who wasn't in the Connells with us, but who was a very important part of my childhood. The Connell brothers and I grew up together. They would come and see their grandparents in the summer in Raleigh. And so we grew up knowing each other, but just in the summer, when all fun's happening, right? The Connells are coming to town. It's going to be fun. We're going to play Fugitive in the park. We're going to play Quagmire football in the rain. We had a great time with those guys. And they were at Carolina because they were living in Georgia, going to school at Mercer. And they transferred up to Carolina.
Wow.
And we just converged there. And we liked the same kind of music, had a great time. Michael Jordan was there. And, Sam Perkins and James Worthy. And the list goes on.
Yeah.
But
that was a time to be in North Carolina.
Time to be in North Carolina.
Wow. So that's really cool that you guys basically rekindled the summers as kids.
Yep.
Now you're on a college campus, but now you've graduated and you aren't getting into biostatistics. You guys are forming a band.
Well, it didn't happen that fast.
Okay.
We
I know there was an era where you've got to tell me, because when you wrote this in the email about you guys having a job as painters.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I had pictures of that.
Yeah. And that's where I figured out I was a terrible painter. But I was working as a biostatistician at a place called Family Health International in Research Triangle Park. It was a great job. And I was in the band at that time. This is starting in December of 1984.
Okay.
And the Connells were already together as a four-piece without me. There was a guy named John Schultz playing drums, and Mike and David and Doug Mcmillan singing. Mm-hmm. And I was doing just my solo thing, getting up and just playing my songs, Buddy Holly songs, and just warming up for bands like Johnny Quest. And I mean, I probably only did 3 little solo shows, right? Okay. But the night that I did do a solo show at a fraternity house in Carolina was the night that I met Michael Jordan. But anyway,
that's fun. Yeah. That's cool.
Well, I got through playing. I had my Rickenbacker 12-string up there, and I'm playing. Set the guitar down. I see Michael in the back, and he looks around and he walks out the front door. I set my guitar down and I run out there and I go, "Hey, Michael!" And he turns around and he comes back, and I'm thinking, oh, what do I say?
Now what do I say?
So I stuck my hand out and I said, "Michael, I sure am proud of you. This is 1983, just won national championship."
Right.
And this is what Michael Jordan said to me, man. Honest to God, Michael said this to me. He said, "Thanks, man." And yeah. Oh, I mean, has he ever said that to you?
He's not said anything to me. No, that's awesome.
So from that moment on, whenever the Connells over the years we play in Chicago, I'd always put him on the guest list. And I'd go up there in these big burly, doormen at Club Metro or Club Vic or something in Chicago. I'd walk up there and I'd say, "Has Michael come yet?" And these guys would always look at me like, "Go on." I go, "No, really. He might come because, we went to school together." But he never did.
Never to show up?
Never
come
show
on.
No,
that's too bad. He just never got the word
Not
you
that
were
I
in town.
know of.
Right. By then, he's probably in glasses, incognito, hiding. Very cool.
I rambled off where we were, but
no,
yeah.
I want to visit this era with you and the Connells. I don't even know where to begin, though, because I know that you guys, and I've told you during lunch that I didn't become familiar with you until the summer of 1994. By then, you guys had been a band for a decade. You've already had huge success with the album titled Ring. And I guess I want to pick up right there because I think I've heard you in the past mention the enormous success you had with Ring. You ended up going on tour in Europe, especially. And on the surface, that would seem like that's awesome. You guys toured in Europe, a band that had been playing college fraternities and college radio and getting played on stations like 99X, which is where I was introduced to you in Atlanta, 99X. So now you guys are touring internationally. But I've heard you mention that ended up being a bad thing for you, right?
Well, is that
a harsh word?
That's probably a tough conclusion to start with.
Okay.
I mean, what I'll tell you is that was probably about a 16, 18 month period of promoting that record 74, 75, which was on the Ring CD. It became a number one hit, and we had never had any success like that. But at that time, we were all in our 30s. We were not babies anymore.
Right.
We'd been traveling all over the U.S. We had done pretty well. I think Ring was like our fourth record, maybe. Darker Days, Bowling Heights, Fun and Games, Once Upon a War is our fifth record. And so, we were mature guys. Most of the guys in the band were married. And so we go overseas and start promoting this song, this number one. And we'd never experienced being a royal before, but we were treated like royalty in Germany and in France and England and Sweden and Norway and Hungary, and we just traveled around and did all kinds of. We even did children's TV shows. We played at these giant festivals. I think we played for like 100,000 people at this outdoor sort of party down there on this piazza in Rome that's just shouting distance from the Colosseum where the Pope does his Easter service. There's this giant lawn, and we're playing there with Def Leppard, and we're bigger than Madonna, we got like the number one hit, right?
Right. And you're on tour at the time, if I'm not mistaken, with 10,000 Maniacs, The Replacements.
That was all before, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you're right. It was about that time,
yeah. And number one song in multiple countries.
Yeah.
In fact, I only recently learned this. I'm sorry, I have to throw this in there because I'm not sure if you're even aware, because I was stunned. The band Travis. So I want to tell you, if you go to the Wikipedia entry, for whatever reason, I was looking at one of their songs, Writing to Reach You. First single, Writing to Reach You, background. Look at that. The song was written by Fran Healy, who admitted that he had written this song while listening to 74, 75 on the radio.
Wow. And you just randomly found that.
Yeah. I mean,
Interesting.
I listen to a lot of Travis, and so for whatever reason, I was looking that song up. Anyway,
that's so interesting.
So anyway, so you're in Europe, and you're being treated like rock star royalty.
Yep.
And it seems like, at least from my perspective, by the time Weird Food and Devastation was coming out in August of '96, I am the geek waiting for the music store to get the CD to come in. And it felt like, from my perspective, that things were really about to break for you guys. What was your mindset at that time?
I think things were about to break up.
Really?
Weird Food and Devastation was a comment. That phrase was a comment that Steve Potak made one day when we were riding down the road in
Europe, right?
Munich. Yeah. And on one side of the street, you had these cathedrals built in the Middle Ages, and on the other side is built in the middle 1900s. You got before the war, after the war. But
wow.
It's because the bombs had destroyed this side of the road, but over here. And so the Weird Food was, just everybody was just fascinated with the aspic and, fish and gelatin and stuff. And we would just get these deli trays, because on your rider when you do a rock show, you get the usual stuff. You get beer and you get carrots and ranch dressing and stuff. But when you travel different European countries, and this is before the European Union, everywhere you go, it's a unique little deli tray. And the one thing that we used to be fascinated with was the aspic. So the weird food and devastation was, something Steve said, and Mike Connell thought that was pertinent. So he jotted it down as a possible album title. We went back to the States, made this record at this studio called Pachyderm, which is in Minnesota. Place was, it was like making a record in a Stephen King novel. The place was, in my feeling, it was such a strange environment. They always joke with you when you go to a recording studio. People always say things like, "It's haunted." Oh, it's haunted. Oh. Really, it's haunted? Oh, it's haunted. And you go, where? Where is it haunted? And they go, well, somebody drowned in the pool. Somebody got locked in the closet down there. And this is before it was a recording studio, of course. And, they're just like telling you this stuff. But then late at night, when you're kind of through and you're wandering around decompressing, wandering around, the lights are kind of out. You're like, whoa, what was that?
Really?
It was a spooky place, and you were out in the country, and you were on this river, and the fish were like fish I'd never seen before, And there was this picnic table on the river, and I would sit out there and just write, and just make these notes. And I just remember feeling like this was the end of the road. And yet, even though that record, even now when I listen to that record, I hear a lot of solo efforts on there. It's a collective of sort of solo material from the various band members, really. I mean, we're playing on each other's songs, but the ideas weren't clicking like they were on Ring. The record before on Ring, we were like, that was our most coordinated band effort of anything we'd done up to that point. I in my opinion, I go back and listen to Ring now, and I go, whoa. I remember how easy those songs were. They just fell in, Mike brought Slackjawed in, and we just we just started writing it like, dang, like that, But Weird Food was not like that. Weird Food was a labor. We were tired. We were worn out. But we had tragedy within the band. And David's first wife had died. She got sick. Had brain cancer, died. She was lovely. Jennifer Lozier Connell was lovely. We all loved her. But David, we were in Europe, and we got this phone call. And it's a long, sad story, but the truth of it is we all had to do without David for a little brief period of time in Europe. And the hero, Tim Harper, our sound man, record producer, best friend, mentor, Budo. I mean, he was everything to us. He stepped up and played bass for David. And, there we are traveling around Europe, and he's back there running sound, playing bass at the soundboard.
Oh, wow.
And there's actually on YouTube now, we did this Dutch little live radio thingy, and the camera pans at one point, and you can see Tim playing an upright bass on 74, 75, and I look at that and I go, whoa, look at us, man. This is like 1995. We're knowing what we know now about David being home, probably missing us, but nursing his wife, and us missing him terribly. Yeah. Because in a lot of ways, David was the easiest member of the Connells to like.
Right.
I mean, I think everybody would agree with that.
I get the sense as a fan. Just he kind of seemed laid back and just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah, he's so witty and so, he's just so, David is just a wonderful guy. I've known him since we were like 5 and 6 years old, He's, to this day, David and I will just send each other a text every now and then. The pure design is just to give the other a chuckle. Because we do know how to make each other laugh. And
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So was any of the stress of that time induced by the label that you guys were under, TVT? Because as a fan, reading between the lines, it really seemed like they weren't doing, I guess, what they should to properly promote you guys. I don't know.
Well, one of our... There was a band called Firehose, and Mike Watt was the outspoken bass player, and we played with them one day, and he said, we were talking to him about our record label, and he's like, you spend your whole career wanting to get on a record label, and then as soon as you get a record deal, you try to get off the record.
Oh, no.
So it would be wrong for me to say that I think that it had that big of an effect on how we wrote, how we played, what we did. If anything, having a record label that we were sort of at odds with, if anything, it probably pulled us together. It might have made it a little bit easier to just keep going. I was doing a solo record. I started working on a solo record during the making of Ring, because I was very prolific at the time, but the Connells were not going to provide me very much room on the record, because Mike was the chief songwriter for the band. Doug was writing great songs. Peel was writing songs. David was writing songs. Steve was getting ready to write some songs. And so
you had all these great songs, and you needed an outlet for them.
I needed an outlet for them, and
the album that you eventually created, Brain Junk.
That's right. That's right. And that was really tough because of a lot of reasons, but that was going on. That time struck a deathly blow to that record, Brain Junk, because it was sort of released when we were in Europe. So I could never travel for it. I could never support it. So I think I only did like maybe 3 or 4 little shows for it. I used to do this with my buddy Johnny Irene. Johnny Irene and I used to do this thing, the Neverby Brothers, because he was a great singer, guitar player, and he's very much a tenor. So he could harmonize on top of my voice wonderfully. And so he helped me do a little show up in the CBGB's arts gallery, which was next door to CBGB's. This is a great story. Can I tell the story?
Of course.
So,
which, by the way, as it relates to the demos for Brain Junk, those are available on Spotify, and I mean, there's stuff that I hadn't ever even heard before associated with that. Anyway, I would encourage people to not only check out the album Brain Junk, but the demos available, at least for me, I saw them on Spotify.
Thank you for that, because nobody's ever promoted that record. I mean, I never promoted it. A record label never promoted it. And so the demos, I decided I could just put them out there.
Yeah.
And no promotion. I mean, I'm not doing anything for them, but they're there for posterity.
Sure. Yeah.
But anyway,
so I interrupted your story there.
Well, me and Johnny Irene, the Neverby Brothers, were playing at this little New York gig, and it was just a little sit-down little venue. There might have been 40 or 50 chairs out there, but they had these lights set up that were right in our faces, and we were sitting there, and we were playing. And at one point during the show, this lovely figure of a human walks in, sits down on the front row, and pulls her hair out of a beret and swings out her hair just like a Clairol shampoo commercial. And like even in my memory, it's in slow motion. And the hair is just like going out like that. And she's tall, but I can't see her because these lights are right in front of my face. But I just know she's somebody because of the way the room has turned towards her. And away from us. And so my friends, Peyton Reed, who happened to be there, who is also the director of the Ant-Man movies.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Peyton was at Carolina with us and everything.
Oh, cool.
He's a friend. So Peyton and Grady Cooper, who was Grady Cooper's show on TV, it's The Unicorn. They were Broughton boys that went to Carolina in the radio, TV, motion pictures thing. So anyway, they were there. As friends, they were in New York. They were back at the bar.
Okay.
And so when me and Johnny finished our little show, the lights came up and it was Uma Thurman sitting there in front. And so I went back to the bar and I said to Peyton and Grady, "You're not going to believe who was sitting in the front row." And they're like, "You're not going to believe who was at the bar." And their story's even better than mine.
Wow, okay.
Mick Jagger in incognito with a fake mustache, a fedora, and a double-breasted suit. And months after this event, the National Enquirer ran this story about Jerry Hall divorcing Mick Jagger because he was chasing Uma Thurman.
Wow.
So
I've never heard that story.
yeah,
And he chased her right to a George Huntley show.
Huntley show. Yeah, I'm just the like bubble gum on the sidewalk, man.
No, is so awesome.
Isn't that right? That's right.
That is awesome. Okay, just to touch back on the European tour and all of the stresses that were involved with that and coming back and then having to cut another album. When did you, because I don't know the timeline as far as when you decided, you know what, I'm getting married, I'm starting a family. Did that have a lot to do with your transition from the rock star lifestyle and moving on to what you do now, which is real estate?
Yeah, that's a great. You're so on top of it. When I met Amelia, my wife, I think I was trying to juggle the Connells going to Europe all the time, and I was trying to do what I could for Brain Junk, and she just wandered into my life. Early one Saturday morning, she was walking her puppy in front of my house, and I was down there. I'm 34 years old. I've never been married, and it's early on a Saturday morning. I see this really cute girl walking by with a dog, and I'm thinking, my first thought was, any girl that's up early on a Saturday morning is my kind of girl, because I've never been a night owl. I've always been a diurnal sun worshiper. I like to be up during the day.
Yeah.
And so she's having trouble getting her puppy. So I always carried a pocket full of dog biscuits, to keep my dog in my sphere. And so I got her dog to come up, and I grabbed her dog's collar, and she came over, and I gave her some dog biscuits. And when we touched, there was this zing. It was like a little shock. And I was like, whoa. And from that moment on, I was looking for her, and
that is so great.
And so, yeah, I think at that time, a door opened for me, and I saw where I could go, and that was 1996. But leaving the Connells was not going to be an easy thing to do. We formed in late 1984. I think I came in like December of 1984. Maybe we got started like in January. Darker Days came out in mid 85. Yeah. And there was still more to do. There was still more to accomplish. And I don't really know why I felt that way, although I do feel like the record Still Life was the record that kind of came out of that period for me of now being committed to someone, married to someone, and Still Life was really dedicated to Jennifer. And it took us that amount of time to really sort of realize the effect that our partners had on not only us, but each other. Mm-hmm. And so then we ended up doing one more little record after Still Life, which was Old School Dropouts, which was when our label dropped us. And we just had these demos that we made in our rehearsal space. And we just said, what the heck? I mean, we didn't even finish them. Those songs were largely unfinished. And in fact, the Connells just released a little record called Stedman's Wake, which is very good. If you haven't heard it, check it out. Stedman's Wake. I think some of Mike's best writing is on there. I love that song. And but they take a couple, I think there's maybe 3 songs on there. Gladiator Heart is one of my favorite Mike Connell songs, and that's on there. And they re-recorded it. And, I'm really proud of those guys for doing that. I think it's just really great. And Mike Ayers is the guy that filled in for me when I was missing shows because of my real estate business, because my real estate business started taking center stage in my life 2001. And so for the next couple of years, Mike Ayers would fill in for me on, a couple of shows here and there. And Mike Connell would go over to Mike Ayers' house and we'd sit down and teach him songs. And then one day, Mike Ayers and I just had that conversation. I was like, can you do it? And he said, only if you promise never to come back. Oh, wow. And so I said, I won't come back. And that was, 20 years ago now. And he's still there. And I think Mike Ayers is a very important part of that group. I think Mike Connell gives him credit for seeing Stedman's Wake, the song, as being a song that you need to keep working on. Mike, I've heard Mike Connell give Mike Ayers some credit for keeping that one going. So,
and they still do shows.
Yeah, they do.
Typically regional.
Yeah, they do.
But yeah, they're still actively out there.
But not
touring.
with me.
Yeah,
I'm not up there with them anymore, other than in spirit, and I'm fine with that.
Okay. Yeah. You know what? I forgot to ask you this story. One more Connell's question. You were telling me over lunch how you got to tell the Long Island, the beach on Long Island story with Doug.
It's kind of a, it's almost a U2 story, because I had seen U2 as a student for the first time at the Carolina Concert for Children. I want to say it was either 82 or 83. And I became an instant fan. I was in awe of them, really. And then the Connells bought the cassette for Joshua Tree when we headed out for our first West Coast tour. And it just became such an important soundtrack for that trip. All that, God, it's just such a great record. I can't listen to it now without thinking about just riding in that van out all across the country. And somewhere in that year, I bought this felt sort of like this cowboy hat, but it was like a stiff brim little thing that kind of looked like Bono's hat at the time. And I was growing my hair out, and I needed a hat to keep my hair out of my face. And so I had sort of long hair, and I had this hat, and I wore it everywhere, and it helped me hide the greasy hair from not showering every day that band guys have to suffer through. Uh-huh. And we were walking across the beach down in Long Beach. We had stopped to see a friend there because we were going to do a show in New York. And my normal attire back at the time was like jeans and a black T-shirt, and I was wearing that hat, and I had long hair. And we were walking across the beach, and we saw these girls. And these girls came up to us and they were very excited to see us. And they said, "Are you guys in a band?" And we were like, "Why, yes, we are." And one of the girls elbowed the other girl and she said, "See, I told you it was you two."
Oh, no.
And I didn't look a thing like Bono. I knew I didn't, but it was wonderful. It was wonderful. Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh, man. Okay. So music's always been in your blood. You talked about your dad early on. I know you're a big fan of the Beatles. How convenient that you were named George, by the way. So you still play, right? And I know that you're hoping to get another album out at some point.
I would love to. It's a really good friend of mine, Kenny Shore, is releasing a record right now. We go back to the early 80s. He used to be in this band called the Dayroom Monitors, and he's a lot like me. He's sort of a troubadour, sort of songwriter dude with an acoustic guitar. And Kenny and I were talking the other day, and he was telling me about this new record of his, and it just made me feel that aliveness that comes from hearing somebody talk about recording a record and really it's like having a child, because you conceive the idea, you sort of like, you have self-doubt is a big part of the process. Yeah. And you go through it and you're working on it and you think, man, I need help. And then you go through periods of thinking, I don't need help. I just need to do it, because if there's one person that you reach, isn't that enough? And I think sometimes when you think about some of the songs that you've written, speaking for myself, when I think about some of the songs that I've written and how they came to me, how they were conceived, how they were born, and how they were recorded and received by audiences, I think to myself, I've still got some of that trickles down and out, and I can still write a song that I can't forget. And in the Roy Orbison handbook of what makes a good song, Roy Orbison said, well, what makes a good song is the ones you can't forget. And so I've got a few.
I was going to say, so you still have some.
I still have some. I've lost two brothers. My brother Neil and my brother Wilson have both passed away. And when my brother Wilson passed away in 2020, I had in a 2-week period of time, the dam broke. And there was 9 songs that just came out of me, and I couldn't stop it. It was like I'd pick up my guitar and I'd just write a song, Wow. And really, to be honest, they're a little dark. They're a little because Wilson and I were close. We were very close. And the Wilson story is such an interesting one, Keith, because we did not agree on politics. In fact, we disagreed on politics, but we managed to be so close. And I've often thought that the power of that relationship, that ability to move on, is symbolic for me in many ways, and how I digest what's the troubling place that we find ourselves in this country right now. I think to myself, I would never go to war with my brother. He was just too important to me. And so there's this song that I have about him that's just to me it just kind of nailed him. It just boom. I think I just got it. And I think Wilson would be really happy that was what came out. Because, Wilson and I spent a lot of time during his illness and his decline. He had glioblastoma, which is a very fast-growing brain cancer that you really can't stop it.
Man, I am sorry for your losses, man. Being an only child, I cannot put myself in your place, but I can't imagine losing a sibling. Very sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So You have been married to Amelia for 25 years.
That's right.
Congratulations to both of you. You have 3 sons, aged 13 to 23.
That's right.
That is, and you've already mentioned at least one of your sons is into music. So
They all are into music. Yeah.
Do you guys ever play together then? Or?
It's funny. I don't think we can really play together that well. We have such a different sense of. My kids are better musicians than I am. They're more. They started their music training early, and I was completely self-taught.
Okay, but correct me if I'm wrong. You can play a 12-string guitar, right? I mean, did I see some? You and Mike Connell were both playing 12-string guitars at the same time.
We were.
Are there songs where I would be able to hear?
Pretty much all of Darker Days, we were both playing Rickenbacker 12 strings. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're very humble, and I don't doubt that your kids are better musicians than you are. but my point is, like, what kind of music do they typically play? Is it just a different genre? Do you ever catch them listening to Connell stuff?
Well, my oldest son Sam has historically been more a student of what I did. I think he early on, when he became a teenager, he paid attention to the Connells and would ask me questions about it, and he noticed. His little brother Aaron was too busy doing what his big brother Sam was doing, so Aaron, I think, was sort of free of having to sort of be under that umbrella. You know what I'm saying? Uh-huh. So Aaron is more of a jazz player, I would say. I think his sensibilities are more adventurous with chord changes, and his music vernacular is just so far above anything I can comprehend. And then there's David, and David is 13, and David can flat out play the bass trombone. I mean, he just picked that sucker up, and it takes a lot of gut power to blow a bass trombone. So I mean, I probably didn't say that right, that they're better musicians, because they would say that's an idiotic thing to say, but there is something that keeps us from being really easy. I would love to, like me and my brother Roy sit around and play John Prine songs. We can play John Prine songs all day long. In fact, Roy and I are working on our set list called, sing along songs, and like that Bob Dylan song, everybody must get stoned. Everybody knows that song.
Yeah.
We're starting with that, and we know John Prine's Paradise and Mike Cross's El Maternal. We've got these songs that we can do. I don't have that with my kids. I don't have that set list of things that we can do, but doesn't mean we won't one day.
Very good. Well, I look forward to that. So I have met your awesome golden retriever puppy, Danny. I haven't seen your cat named Piper. Mm-mm. Is Piper just hiding out?
She might be sitting right there for all I know. Is she?
No.
That's her seat, by the way.
Really? Oh,
yeah. Is it still warm?
No. Let me move my phone. My phone was blocking that spot.
Yeah, I don't know where Piper is,
okay.
But
all right.
Yeah, Danny was glad to meet you.
Yeah.
I saw you trying to put him in your bag.
So
you want to take him home?
I didn't know you saw that. Yeah. Okay, so I know that when it comes to hobbies, you like to go out and ride your bike. Mm-hmm. Raleigh seems to be a bike-friendly town.
Very.
Yeah. Please tell me you're not one of those bicyclists that block traffic, right? You have a bike lane, right?
Yeah.
Is that good enough for you?
Yeah, it's good enough for me. I'm too chicken to ride around cars, so I go out to Umstead Park. There's a big greenway system here that takes you off the road.
Okay. Last book you read was On the Way to Birdland.
Yeah, I did a book review for it.
Yeah, so I mean, You wrote it for, is it called Our State Magazine?
Yeah. I wrote a.
You're a published author.
I'm a published author. Yeah, and I wrote an article for Our State on the return of live music. And it was just talking about the different venues in North Carolina where live music has come back. And it was so much fun writing that article. I mean, it was just, put a lot of research into it, trying to figure out who's out there, what's going on. And it's really cool.
That is cool. And you had made an Atticus Finch reference earlier. To Kill a Mockingbird, your favorite book of all time?
When you ask that question, I think to myself, you could probably answer that in so many different ways. That would probably be the one that I've. There's a lot of great books out there.
It's the only book I've read twice, George.
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
And I don't read fiction, so there you go. Yeah. So for what that's worth, I love that your favorite app is Google Maps. I was just thinking this the other day. It's like, how did we exist before GPS?
I don't know.
How was that a thing? Because I was a geek with the paper maps and drawing myself maps to get to places, stuff like that. I mean, those days are gone. Now you just put an address in your phone and you get there. But I specifically remember my grandmother, who, a previous episode of this podcast, Nana, my gift when I moved to New York from Charleston, South Carolina, back in 2009, the big gift she wanted to buy me was a GPS for my car. And I remember her getting that for me and me thinking, wow, this is really cool. I just don't know that I'll really use it. I would have never found my way to Newark, New Jersey on that first drive up there without it. And it hit me way back then. It's like, I would not have gotten here with a paper map. I just would not have gotten here. And kids today, you put a map in front of them, it might as well be a foreign language.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a guy that come in handy, by the way, as a real estate agent, GPS.
Oh yeah. And those old maps, the big book maps, when we used to travel all over the country, our tour manager, Jimmy Descant, if we had a great experience in a restaurant, Jimmy would write, in Kansas City, he would make a little note in the side on the Kansas or the Missouri map, depending on what Kansas City you're in. He'd make a note that this is a great restaurant, And so I'm sure he still has that book.
Oh, wow.
And of course, what was wrong with that book was, he had to replace it every couple of years because they get updated.
Get worn out too. Yeah, and updated. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah,
New
and
roads.
get worn out too. Yeah, so... back in the old days, those old maps would come in handy.
When you did transition away from the rock band lifestyle, which, by the way, lead guitarist, I don't know that I mentioned that early on, so shame on me. Why did you choose to get into real estate instead of something more along the lines of your college degree?
Well, the world was a very different place. I did consider going back into biostatistics. I would have been in a whole new era though, because I would have had to go back to school.
Okay. Yeah.
I did want to be a school teacher. I did a little bit of research, and quite honestly, I figured out that there was going to be no way to support a family on a teacher's salary.
Yeah. And
so I couldn't do that. And my wife said, well, you love houses. And, I got my real estate license and actually really enjoyed the classes. And to be honest with you, it's been a perfect fit.
Cool.
And the thing about real estate for me has always been the problem solving aspect of it. Someone comes to you, they want a house. They've probably been looking online or they've been talking to other people perhaps. Or maybe they've just started their search, but wherever they are in the process, the reason they're talking to me is they're having a little problem with it. Huh. And so what I do is I help solve that problem. And a lot of times it's just all they need is just to get the ball rolling. Just get out there and start looking. And it's really fun. And I'm not a shopper. I don't like to go shopping, but I love going house shopping because While people are walking around the house looking to see if their dining room table is going to fit in the dining room, I'm walking around looking for cracks up in the walls like that one there. Don't look. Don't look. And,
This is an awesome house. What year was your house built?
1937.
Oh,
yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, I love this house. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, okay. And I can just tell that, well, you would have made a good teacher. I can see how you're a natural fit for the personability of a real estate agent, and never mind your just love for homes in general. So, I mean, this is a perfect, feels weird to say second career for you, but, effectively it is,
Yeah.
All right. So your survival needs are met, but you're not coming back to Earth. You find yourself on Mars of all places. Okay. So in other words, we're going with the premise that you have oxygen, okay, and water and all that good stuff. So you're going to take 5 items with you. I've recently, tinkered with this question, so this is kind of new territory for me here. So thanks for playing along. You're going to take your bike. I guess we're going to assume that gravity's working out for us there. Your acoustic guitar, pencil and paper, a warm coat. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Do you think that we'll ever see humans actually get to Mars? Because it seems like we can't even get back to the moon.
Wait, I thought Matt Damon was Wait.
Matt
wasn't
Damon.
there The Martian?
Yeah, The Martian,
Yeah. Man, that's a tough one. I'm sure we'll make it to Mars. Yeah, I mean, they found water there. I'm sure we'll figure out a way. I mean, if you've got H2O, you can get hydrogen, right? Mm-hmm. And think of all that you can do with hydrogen.
Okay.
You can do think of what you can do with oxygen. So you figure out a way to split those water molecules and you can make power and breathable air.
Okay, so earlier when you were talking about the recording studio that was haunted, right? I should have circled back to an experience you had in college. Do you recall, I guess you were walking back from the dining hall in the dark, December 1980, just after John Lennon had been shot?
Yeah.
What happened then?
Yeah, so this is a long time ago, and I was 18 years old. And over the years, in my mind, when I've thought about what happened to me in the woods that night, it sort of blends in with another story that happened right around that same time. Right in front of me, this girl collapsed on the ground and started having a seizure. And I was the first person on the scene, and it was right at dusk. We had just left the dining hall, and everybody came up, and we started piling our coats. Everybody took their coats off because she's on the ground. The ground's really cold, and she's having a seizure, and it's a violent one. And so we started piling. I was the first one there, so I was the first one to put my coat on her. And there was a mound of coats on her. The medics got there. We're like all kind of standing off trying to give her some privacy, and the medics, and they get her in the ambulance and they take her away. And it took about an hour. And I'm standing out there, and because I got to get my coat. Mm-hmm. And there were these people that were in this shared experience, so we were talking. Well, not long after that, there's a shortcut that you could take that would take you through the woods down the Holzhauser dorm at UNC Charlotte. And I used to pop down that hill and run down through the woods. It was like a really steep hill where probably in the original development, they had pushed a mound of dirt up there, and you just like run down this hill and you could just run right through the woods. I found out my brother Neil had called me and said, "Did you hear what happened?" And I was like, "No." And Neil called me up and said, "John Lennon was shot and killed." I was like, no, John Lennon was shot and killed. And that whole day was just like going to class and just like, I can't go to school. John Lennon's been shot and killed by some random dude. And we didn't know anything about it yet. And that night, it was about 5:30. It was December, so it was getting dark. Might have been like 6 because it was dark. I took the shortcut, And I was going down that hill and into the woods. And I just remember I was really preoccupied with my feelings about John Lennon. But I was still kind of affected by this girl who had collapsed days before on the ground. And I got down in the woods and I had this supernatural, I mean, I can't think of another way to describe it. My hair just went up on my back and on my head. And I just had this incredibly strong feeling that there was something really bad getting ready to happen to me. That there was something really close, dangerous, coming at me. And I hit the gas. And when I popped out of the woods at the first light there, I got well into the light and I got to the door of Holzhauser dorm, and I turned around and I looked back to the woods, and I thought, that's silly. That's just childish. I was just afraid of the dark. But there was something there. I mean, in all my life, I have never, there was this just strong feeling of danger. And believe me, in my life, there's been times when danger happened that I didn't sense. So I don't feel like I have a really strong sense of all danger. That's what popped into my head as an event in my life that made me sort of think about that time in your life where you don't think about it, you just trust it.
Right.
And you just run.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that we will never fully understand, and so many people experiencing inexplicable things.
Yeah.
And it sounds like did you ever go take that shortcut again after that, or did you avoid?
I did. I think I even went looking for what it was. I ended up deciding that it was probably a coyote or a wolf or something that was out in the woods that I had probably run up on. There was something that my spidey sense.
Yeah.
And I think I went back into the woods, but next time I went through making noise, singing, clanging.
Yeah. Carrying a knife.
Yeah.
Your favorite comfort food is fried chicken, which I'm going to use to try to convince you because, we need to get you to Dallas at some point, and there's a place called Babe's Fried Chicken.
Ooh.
And I think you might enjoy it.
Yeah, that might get me there.
Yeah. Okay, so you've actually crossed paths with some celebrities in your life. You mentioned Uma Thurman and Mick Jagger incognito. Matt Dillon?
Oh, yeah.
Where was that?
Again in New York. We had played at the Beacon Theater. And below the Beacon Theater, the green room, quote unquote, was the Chinese restaurant in the basement. And so way, before the show and after the show is where you go, right? And we were on tour with the Replacements, and so we were sharing this space with the Replacements, and they were notoriously interested in keeping that space free of people. They wanted it to be just a band space where you could walk around and do the noises you need to make and do the machinations that you need to do before a show, or lay down on the couch or whatever, without interaction with other people. But after the show, the green room becomes something different. And that night, after the show, Doug Mcmillan, who's the singer of the Connells, and I were down there with our elbows on the bar, and Matt Dillon, the actor, not the sheriff, Matt Dillon, the actor, comes up, and we must have been promoting Ring at the time because we had because we were talking about Get a Gun, so we must have been doing One Simple Word. The album One Simple Word has a song called Get a Gun, and it's a song. It's metaphorically, get a gun, we're losing altitude. And Matt loved that song. And so Matt comes up to me and Doug and he says, I want to make a video for you guys. And back in those days, MTV was still fairly young, and And Hollywood was starting to embrace it. So you were starting to see bigger names doing music videos. And so Doug and I were like, well, yeah, Matt, I mean, that would be awesome. Of course, it would be really cool. And so Matt Dillon was like, he was going into his mind, you know, and this is what he said. He said, get a gun. Get a gun is get a gun. and Doug and I looked at each other and we were like, you're right. You're right. It is. It is. And that was about as far as we got in that. But, you know, he was in some great movies. And at one point, these two really attractive young girls just kind of come walking up. Keep in mind, we're in a Chinese restaurant underground down in around Beacon Theater, you know. And these two I don't know how those girls got in. There's not a lot of people there. They were extremely attractive. And they walk up to us. Doug and I are smart enough to know they're not there to talk to me and Doug. And so Matt Dillon is standing there and he won't look at them. He turns away from him. He's smoking a cigar. That's what guys used to do back then. And he's smoking this cigar, you know, and he's kind of got his elbows up on the bar and he's turned away from him. And they're looking at him and they go, excuse me, Mr. Dillon. Can we just get your autograph? And he won't even look at him.
What?
And so I tap Matt Dillon on the shoulder. I don't know him. And I go, hey, Matt, there's these two cute girls that just want your autograph. And he goes, I don't want to talk to them. And we go, well, you know, if we're wasting time here, if you'll just like sign their autograph, they'll go away because they're saying that's all they want.
Uh-huh.
And so they go, so he turns around and they go, can you say, let's do it for Johnny?
Oh, no.
And so Matt Dillon, he just becomes, he just like this darkness. And we don't know if it's all an act.
Right?
It's got to be an act,
Oh,
right?
no.
I'm telling this story and even I'm thinking, this is an act. But he was like, he was one of those guys that seemed to value his space and his time. He's off the clock. He's at a closed party, and he didn't appreciate it. But I just could not believe.
Did the girls just leave then?
They just left.
Wow.
And I was like, well, Doug and I just looked at each other like, yeah,
So
he's the man.
I know that there was a video made for Get a Gun. Was he the one that made that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, he didn't get to it.
All right. John Prine.
Love him.
Okay. You met him.
Yeah. I brought John Prine. So Get a Gun. Again, Get a Gun. We had our T-shirts and we had boxer underwear as our swag, you know. And our brilliant swag designers, Tanis Root, Bill Mooney, designed this pair of underwear with a holster, like a Roy Rogers holster with a gun and the Connells on the holster. And so when you put your underwear on, it looked like you had this white underwear with a red holster. So you could. So
Where do you get a pair of these, man?
yeah, they need to reissue them. But anyway, when I went to meet John Prine, I brought him a pair of underwear.
Okay.
And so he came out and did the show. So I went back in his green room, met Nancy Griffith and John Prine, went out, watched the show, got great seats. And we were just like 4 rows back. So I'm looking right up. I mean, he's just right there. And he said, I met a new friend tonight. This is during the show. Met a new friend tonight. He brought me a pair of underwear. And
no.
and I'm wearing them.
Oh,
He said, yeah, I've got them on. And he just looked at me. He said, I appreciate it. And that was about all he said. You know, he went in there and did Sam Stone was alone. And I'm just thinking, this is great. And later that night after the show, got to go hang out with my man John Prine.
How cool, man.
Just a closed little party, drinking drinks, smoking cigarettes, talking about, anything and everything. It was one of my greatest nights ever.
And my wife, she saw you guys and got to hang out with the Connells back in December of 1996 at the House of Blues in Los Angeles.
Ooh.
Now, the cool part about that, obviously it was a great experience for her. You guys were so nice. But I got to listen to that concert. It was the first concert that I had ever heard was streaming on the internet. Huh. I mean, we're talking early days of streaming.
Wow.
And it was a friend of mine, Zach Reimer, an earlier episode of At the Mic, who had set up, I mean, he was the only guy on our dorm floor who had this ability, really, with his... And so I had to go and sit at his computer with a pair of headphones to listen to one of the first streamed concerts on the internet, and it was you guys, December 1996. So anyway, that's what was coming to mind there when you were talking about your experience with John Prine. It's just so cool when you...
And your wife was there?
Yeah, because she was living in L.A. at the time.
Wow.
So Carrie... another earlier episode of At the Mic.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's just what occurred to me. I saw you guys for the first time. I went the Ranch Bowl in Omaha.
Yeah.
I don't know if that rings a bell at all.
Man, we loved it.
Yeah. So
we loved it.
That would have been...
it's a bowling alley and a nightclub.
Yeah.
Come on, man. What's not to love?
That's awesome. Yeah. I remember I drove up from Lincoln. I was like, I'm going to see this band.
And by the way, at that Los Angeles show, that day, David Connell and I rode down the elevator with Little Richard.
Oh, wow.
And Little Richard is on the... We're coming down because he lived in that hotel right across the street from the venue. And David grew up in Macon, Georgia, as did Little Richard. Mm-hmm. So Little Richard walks on the elevator. And let me tell you, he's a big guy. And you're on an elevator with Little Richard. He's the biggest guy on the elevator. I mean, he's got a presence about him.
And it was just him?
No, he had two guys with him, and it was just me and David. So it was 5 people on this elevator. Uh-huh. And David goes, hey, Mr. Richard, I'm David Connell, and you and I have something in common. He goes, what would that be? And David said, well, I grew up in Macon, Georgia. And he went, what? Baba-loo, baba-laba-lad-loo. No, he didn't. But you know, he was electric, man. He was just like, he got right up in your face when he talked to you. And it was just like, and I think we got a hug from him.
Oh, that's cool.
But, you know, we were just, I mean, he knew that we knew that he was a god. Uh-huh. You know, I mean, he just knew. He knew that we knew.
Yeah.
We were on to him, man.
That's cool, man.
And he's like, so y'all in a band? And we was like, yeah, we're playing across the street tonight. And he's like, man, hope y'all have a good... I'll try to get down there. But I don't know if we're going to have time because but we might. You know, and that's the way he was. He was pure electricity.
Did you spend the whole evening just scanning the crowd? Is Little Richard here?
We knew he wasn't there.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, again... He's bigger than Uma Thurman. Everybody, you know, you don't want Little Richard to come to your show.
Yeah. Janine Garofalo? You had
Janine Garofalo, yeah.
How'd that go?
Oh, that was fun. I mean, there was Doug had been in this movie called Bandwagon, and he was in
I've never seen. I can never find that movie.
It's on YouTube.
He plays like a tour manager, right?
Plays a tour manager.
Okay,
yeah,
it's on YouTube.
Linus something. And Doug is in this movie with Kevin Corrigan, and Kevin shows up to one of our like Wednesday night shows wherever we were, Fort Collins, Colorado or something, you know, in a small little venue, and he shows up he's on location shooting you know, scenes for a movie he's in with Janine Garofalo. And again, I find myself with my elbows on a bar with Doug and Janine, and in this case, it's Janine Garofalo and Kevin Corrigan. And Janine was so funny. I mean, she's really just an incredibly quick-witted individual, and she was sizing things up. I just remember how masterfully she sized things up, and she was a real observer of people. And, you know, that's what you do. What you end up doing is you end up just kind of like finding yourself in a situation. And what you end up doing is just looking around at your surroundings and saying, look at where we are. We're all really far from home, you know.
Where did you meet Mick Fleetwood?
Oh, man, I forgot about Mick Fleetwood. Yeah, we were doing the Lorelei Festival in Germany, which is this beautiful setting. It's like Hitler built one of these summer palaces up in the mountains, you know, and you know there's like a train track across the river, and you can see a train and the smoke and everything. And we did this festival there. It's a, you know, there's hippies from all over the world around there selling their jewelry and incense, and people getting their zen on, you know, boogieing down. And it's Mike and the Mechanics, Fleetwood Mac, the Connells. There was a band from Germany that was huge, Slaughterhouse.
Fury and the Slaughterhouse.
Yeah, a bunch of bands. So it was like Connells were playing. And again, we had the number one hit. Did I say yet that we had the number one hit? And we're there. And so we're, David Connell and I go in the bathroom, which is just a mobile home unit bathroom thingy where, you know, you walk up some stairs, you walk in, there's some toilets and some sinks in there. And David and I are in there taking a leak, and we're just talking like we normally would. And all of a sudden, there's this noise from one of the stalls.
Oh, no.
And Mick Fleetwood stands up. You know, he's about 6'8".
Oh, gosh.
He's huge.
Wow.
And he's got this big red suit that he's putting on that is an electronic drum kit suit. And so he walked out, so he was putting it on, and he was telling me and David, he's like, I've got this really cool suit that I can play the drums on. So the toms are here, and I can play like cymbals here.
That must be impossible.
And I've got, you know, my floor toms are up here, and my kick drum is down here, and my snare is here. And he's got all this stuff, and he can play this suit, and he can play a drum kit. And so when Fleetwood Mac came out to play, he walks out on stage like the big Spider Man that he is, playing this drum kit. And at the time, nobody had ever seen anything like this before. But, you know,
and he wasn't wired to anything?
It was radio. It was, you know,
That must have taken a lot of practice to try to learn where all the drums were on that thing.
I didn't say it was great.
Okay, yeah.
I didn't say it was great.
You didn't. That's true. Hey, let's give a shout out to your 98-year-old mother.
Oh, yeah.
You've talked about her before, just in conversations with me. Sounds like a sweetheart. And I just wanted to, you know, take a moment to say hello to her.
Yeah.
On this. And so if you wanted to speak to her, but I know that if you could go back in history, you'd like to meet your grandfather. Is that your mom's father or the other side? Or?
Well, her grandfather was one of the guys I was named for. His name was Harris Greenlee Ray. I was named George Harris Huntley when I was born, named after my two great grandfathers. And he was just he was the legend that everybody knew about when I was growing up. My grandfather, it was my mother's father's father. Mm-hmm. And I just grew up just hearing all these great stories about all these people. You know, they were farmers. They were men that figured out how to they set up a sawmill. When cotton was king, they grew cotton. When they needed corn for their livestock, they grew corn. You know, they had multiple gardens over by the house. My grandpa had a garden down in the field. They had fruit trees. They just lived on this farm that my brothers and my sister and I would go down there in the summer. And, you know, it was the house that my great-grandfather had essentially built for his family. My grandfather was born there. My mother was born there. And we just grew up going down there. And, you know, they were farmers. They had a lot of kids. My mother was one of 10 children. And to this day, we are still very, very close. And when we get together, there's over 100 people. And we get together for Thanksgiving and the 4th of July. And not everybody, of course, but, it's a big gathering when we get together. And we're still very, very close. And, my mom is 98, and she's just we survived. My dad died when I was 13. And so my mom and we kind of grew up together. I watched her blossom after Daddy died. There's a lot of times there's good that comes out of something bad. And my mom just blossomed. I mean, she learned how to balance little things, the ordinary things, like balancing checkbook and managing the affairs and managing her 5 children. And consequently, the confidence and she became an elder in the church. Like, women weren't elders in the church, but she did it quietly, and she did it with her own brand of strength. And I just watched her. I've just watched her forever. And to this day, when we get together, it's a very affectionate relationship that's based on mutual respect for each other. She loves what the Connells did. Because she got a lot of mileage out of that. She really did. She got a lot of mileage out of that. When she would chaperone teenagers, with church group stuff, they figured out that her son was in a rock band, and they wanted to be in her car.
Nice.
But shout out to Virginia Huntley there.
All right, absolutely. So as you were talking about some of your family history there. The song 1934 off of the Connells' first album came to mind. Can you just, for my own curiosity's sake, tell me a little bit about that story, 1934?
So my Aunt Betsy, who's my mom's little sister, is one of the family historians, and she told me this very fascinating story one time. Betsy Blankenship told me that during the Civil War, my what would probably be like a great something or other, great grandmother, was an older woman, and there was some family silver that she buried to hide from the Yankees who were coming this way.
Right.
Because, we knew what they did. They knew what was going on in Atlanta, and they felt like they were coming back. There was, on the back end, word had gotten to the country folk.
And where was the house located? Was it in South
This
Georgia?
was in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina.
Okay.
Down around near Charlotte.
Uh-huh.
And so word came that there was marauders, a gang of marauders were coming. And so she started hiding stuff, and she didn't tell anybody where she hid it. And she was an old lady. And so as the war ended, and, I don't know how many years it took for people to kind of get over it, she forgot where
they're not over it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not over it.
I'm from the South. I know this to be true.
Well, she didn't know where it was. And so one of her heirs, who was my great uncle Calvin Ray, who was a veterinarian, dedicated a large part of his life to trying to find it, the family silver. He dug up the backyard, looking for it. Well, in the 1930s, they took up the floorboards in the kitchen floor to put plumbing or electricity, one or the other. And they pulled up these floorboards, and they're like, hey, what's this? And they found this box of silver. And
was the relative who had been looking for it all this time still around?
Yeah.
Yes. Nice.
Yeah, he's still, I know. What was a wonderful gesture on his part, because it's a really big family. He just split it up and gave it all away. I think my mom still has a spoon from that collection. I'm not really sure about how all that dissemination took place, but in that song, I was attempting in 8 lines or less to tell that story.
Right.
So really, I think what I was writing a song about was probably something a little bit different, but I was trying to use that story. I'm still not sure what I meant by I don't know if I care anymore. Maybe it's, the silver's hidden under the floor. It's been there since the Civil War, but I'll be out by 1934,
there
which was just a twist on that. Yeah.
I love it. And that's what you do with so many of the songs you write is, you're a storyteller. It's so easy to pinpoint a George song on the album, even if it was someone else singing it. You know what I'm saying? Because you tell a story with your songs, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple more questions. You've been so gracious with your time, and we will wrap this up here. But I love this. Your most embarrassing moment is any time you hear your voice in a recording, then you're not going to want to listen to this interview because that's what this has been. Do you want to delve deeper into your answer on any regrets you'd care to share? And your answer was not standing up to BS sooner in your life.
Not standing up. What did I say?
You said not standing up to the BS sooner in your life.
Oh, yeah. This has been a lifelong thing for me. I think many times have I looked over my shoulder and wished that I had been man enough to stand there and own the moment and say what I really thought. And yet, at the same time, I don't think it was my calling. I think I would have done it if it had been my calling to be outspoken, strong, or decisive, whatever it is that makes those leaders do that. I never was a leader in that way, that in the cycle of BS that we all witness in our lives. Sometimes we have regrets that we didn't say something.
Yeah.
And so, I'm 60 years old now, and I'm at a point in my life where I recognize that it's all gravy from here out. The men in the Huntley family are not known for being long livers. And so I'm living my life now. I'm sort of committed to this sort of, it's all gravy. And what is gravy? But living your life more intentionally and more honestly. And so I think that's why I answered that question that way, is that maybe now I'll be a little more able to, what do I got to lose?
Yeah. What do you got to lose?
Yeah.
Okay. Bucket list. I love this. You want to record another album, and I hope that you will tell me as soon as you do, because you've got a lot of songs you got to get recorded. Were you going to hopefully do something with Peel, the drummer?
I would love to do something with Peel, but it's going to require a little magic because Peel is on a national tour with the Veldt right now. Danny and Daniel Chavis and Peel, those guys are out there traveling right now. And in fact, they just met Mark Burgess, which was a really big guy from this band called the Chameleons UK when we were all growing up. They're out there doing it. I would love to play with Peel again. I think I always felt a musical camaraderie, but I don't know. I don't know if that's in the cards. If it's ever in the cards, it would be wonderful.
Okay. Your Amazon cart's got pet smell remover. Has been having some problems with Danny?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
he's
man.
A ball of energy.
Oh, but he's pretty good dog.
Yeah, he's a sweetheart. And you have recently put your, like I mentioned earlier, the, I guess, outtakes, the demos from Brain Junk, available on Spotify. I guess search under George Huntley.
Yeah.
And you will find them there. And
you want to know something interesting?
Of course.
There's another George Huntley out there. And
did you tell him you were here first?
We're almost exactly the same age.
Whoa.
So I can't tell him that I was here first. But he's from Indianapolis. We've talked on the phone.
Oh.
But he got to George Huntley, the name, first on Spotify. And he makes all these records and they're out there, but they're not me.
No.
And they're very different than me. And
so what's the best way to search for you under
well,
maybe
you just
brain
have to
junk?
sort of know a little bit about what I look like and know that, but it's weird. I don't know it, but what makes it even worse is one of my sons, Sam, found out that this George Huntley was inadvertently using my picture on
inadvertently.
Yeah, I don't know how it happened, but when I talked to George about it, George said, "I really don't know how that happened."
Oh.
But he took a photo, or somebody did in his camp, took a snapshot of the Connells, narrowed in on me, and it synced up to him. And he says it's by accident. He couldn't figure out a way to undo it.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm not sure it's ever really been undone, because you don't just dial 1-800-SPOTIFY and
right.
She goes, "Spotify, can I help you?" It ain't like that. No.
I mean, I know that's
me.
This is you. So if you look under George Huntley, is this the other George Huntley right here?
Yeah, there he is.
So, all right. So you need the George Huntley with the long hair and not the guy with short hair and glasses.
Yeah.
So, but that is interesting.
But he's a really nice guy. We've had great phone conversations and all, but we're two different flavors at the ice cream store.
How did that first call go? Did you seek him out and be like, "Bro, that's me"?
Yeah, that was actually it.
That is awesome. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Anything that you think we need to cover, or have we pretty much done it all?
Well, do your listeners know what an awesome dude you are?
Okay.
I mean,
thank you.
You're
very kind.
I would think that it would be very interesting to have somebody interview you for this program one day.
Many guests have asked for that, so I don't know.
Because just in my short time knowing you, I always find you to be, you have a sense of what is concise and cogent and succinct in the way that you tell a story.
You've never heard me tell a joke then, because I bomb those all the time.
Jokes?
Oh, I can't.
Yeah.
They take forever, and they're not even funny by the time I get to the end. But thank you for this.
The way you told your story, when I was asking you about your story today, the way you told your story was like, and you painted it in such a way that I think everybody would like hearing it and could relate to that feeling of when things just seemed like they kind of came to you.
Yeah, but no, it's been a pleasure talking with you and getting to know you, George. And thanks for opening your home up to me quite literally, man. Thanks so much for being a part.
Appreciate it.
It was such a thrill for me to sit down with George in his home, spend the day with him. And big thanks to George for treating me to lunch and some excellent Carolina barbecue while I was in town. So grateful that he could make the time for a conversation, and so grateful that you could as well. And hopefully you'll be able to join us next week when I sit down with a friend of mine, Krista McIntyre, who, man, she has seen a lot, and she has a story to tell. Hope you'll join us for that. Until then, if you feel we've earned it, I hope you'll take a moment to rate and review this podcast. Give us 5 stars, please, over at Apple iTunes or Spotify. Feel free to drop a note our way through the website at themikeshow.com. That's at themikeshow.com. And don't forget the YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/@themike.with_Keith. youtube.com/@themike.with_Keith. You never know what's going to show up over there. So be sure to not only subscribe, but click that bell so you get the notifications when something posts. Please also take a moment to share. You can pick out one episode. Why not this one? Pick out one episode and share with someone in your world as we look to grow this audience. And we can only do that with your help, and that's the truth. So thank you very much for sharing. Well, until we do sit down again, I hope above all else that you will go be free. And thank you for listening.
This has been At the Mic with Keith, an independent podcast production. Head to atthemikeshow.com for archived episodes, sponsor information, and ways to connect.